Everyone, this is your Module 5 feedback. I'm going to be pretty quick with this one. Make sure you watch this all the way through. All right, classical music. There's still some confusion. Often we will talk with people and say, ooh, I really like classical music. Or I like going to classical music concerts, or that piece sounds like classical music. Now, in common parlance, classical music is the Western classical tradition. All that we have been studying thus far comes from the Western classical tradition, okay? Now, informally, we can call that classical music. But you need to be careful because classical, within the Western classical tradition, classical, the style period, is music of the Western classical tradition from 1750 to 1825, right? Baroque is in the Western classical tradition. We could say Baroque is classical music if we're using classical informally. Classical style period is in the Western classical tradition. We could say classical style period is classical music. It's a little bit of a redundancy there. The Romantic style period is classical music in the sense that it is from the Western classical tradition. But the Romantic period is after the classical period. Baroque, classical, Romantic. And then 20th century and beyond, 1900s and beyond, that's the final period that we're discussing, which is in Module 6, which you should be in now, and I hope you're enjoying it, okay? Make sure you get that distinction. I had a lot of people say that the music on their listening quiz from Module 5 was classical music. It wasn't. It was Romantic. It was from the Romantic period. So make sure you get that distinction. All right. Not all vocal music is opera. This comes from the Guess That Composer game, okay? Yes, there is opera that we listen to. For it to be opera, you need to have an orchestra, all right? And the orchestra, depending on the style period, could be very prominent or very subdued. In the Romantic period, the orchestra tends to become a little bit more prominent than in the classical period. But also to have opera, you need costumes and staging. So it can be difficult to distinguish oratorio from opera if you don't have any visuals. An oratorio has an orchestral accompaniment, but it is staged like a concert. All right, all the orchestra's on the stage, the singers are on the stage, they stand, they sing, they sit. There's no acting, there's no costumes. Okay, that's oratorio. Now, of course, I'm not going to count you wrong if you say that something is an opera when it's really an oratorio, or you say that something is an oratorio when it's really an opera, because what I'm giving you is purely oral clues. If you don't have any visual cues to see that there's no staging, well, you can't tell by ear. But we also have art songs and also that lute song from the Renaissance period. And that is vocal music. People are singing, but they're not singing in an opera. They're singing in an art song. So if you have just piano accompaniment, that's not opera. If you have just lute accompaniment, that's not opera. And in Module 6, which you're in now, the Pierrot Lunaire has a chamber orchestra as accompaniment, but it's not opera. It's a song cycle, orchestral song cycle. Now, if it's in a Guess That Composer and I give you an orchestral song cycle, you're not going to be able to tell the difference right away unless you just really know the piece. But just remember that. Not all vocal music, but we also had the Sacred Mass from Palestrina. And that was a cappella. It was just voices, but that's also not opera. Okay, so be careful. Not all singing is opera in the Western classical tradition. No Shazam. Why? Because Shazam is cheating. What's that you say? Shazam is cheating. You will goof and I will know. I'll give you an example. One of the Guess That composers, somebody guessed the name of the performer. Now, this is statistically almost impossible, especially with this particular performance. It was a very obscure piece from the very, very earliest of the classical style period from a very unknown composer. Unless You were a seasoned musicologist who happened to have a specific interest in this particular composer such that you could distinguish different performances of the same piece by different performers. You would not be able to name the performer. You would not be able to name the performer. You would not be able to name the performer. And so if you type in, I think this piece is by the performer, I'll know you probably Shazammed or you did some other reverse music search. Don't do it. And remember, I don't really care that you get the composer right. We're going to talk about this in a second. It's about you being able to show to me that you have developed your ears enough that mostly you can tell what style period a piece is in. Okay? Now we go a couple steps further so that you get to the genre and then eventually to a possible composer. A plausible composer. It is plausible that this could have been written by this composer. All right? So, again, Shazam is cheating. Don't do it. All right. Propose a composer. I think I talk a lot about this in this module's lecture. But remember, the SLO is to propose a composer, not to describe the music, not to guess the genre, not to guess the style period. Although guessing those two things will help a lot. It's propose a composer. If you don't propose a composer, you're not showing me what I need to know in this SLO. So your steps. Yes, you should describe the piece, often doing the description of the instrumentation and the harmonies and the texture will help you place the piece in a style period. And that's important because we've studied a lot of composers, but only a few of them come from the Baroque period. We've studied a lot of composers, but only a few of them come from the 20th century and beyond period. We've studied a lot of composers, but only a few of them come from the Romantic period. So your step 2 is to use your description to kind of help you place it in a style period. All right, so you describe the orchestration, the harmonies, and the texture, and you say, because of the large orchestral forces and the lush emotional harmonies, I'm going to place this in the Romantic period. Good job. Then you kind of want to go to genre. And you can be a little bit fuzzy with the genre. Is it a solo piano piece? Well, you can call it a piano sonata. It might not be. It might be a character piece. But hey, you know, we're in the ballpark. If you say that it's opera and it's clearly an art song because there's no orchestra, well, yeah, I kind of ding you a little bit because that's not really the genre. But if you say it's a tone poem and it's really a symphony, yeah, that's fine with me. If you say it's a symphony, it's really a tone poem, yeah, that's fine with me. But a general genre, because then your next step is to think, okay, well, who wrote in the Romantic period and wrote art songs? I know, Franz Schubert wrote in the Romantic period and wrote art songs. I'm going to put in Franz Schubert. Very good. Or maybe it's a piano concerto, but it's very advanced harmonic language and the orchestral forces are just huge. Well, then you might say, okay, because of the really large orchestral forces and because the harmonies are kind of sizzly and jazzy, don't really sound romantic, it's probably in the 20th century and beyond. So we've got a piano concerto from the 1900s and beyond. Who wrote something that sounds like a piano concerto in the 1900s and beyond? Well, a lot of people did. But for the composers we're studying, it could be George Gershwin. Okay? So then you have to actually write it out. Name a composer. Don't do all of this and not give me a composer. Okay? If you do all this work, I need to know what composer you think could have been all these things. So you have to you should have this sentence somewhere in a propose a plausible composer question. Therefore, I think that composer could have composed this piece. You need that sentence in there. You need it. You need it bad. Okay? Next. ePortfolio artifacts. You need 7 artifacts. Now, unfortunately, Portfolium is causing problems. I've got some people who I can see one of their artifacts, but none of the others. So because Portfolium is being so hard to work with, I'm going to say what you need to do is to submit the YouTube link directly in the assignment and not the portfolio link. So, I still need the narrative, right? The narrative is kind of what I'm grading. What your description of the event, what you learned, how music appreciation has helped you enjoy the event or the music even that much more. So I still need that narrative. You can either put that in the description of your YouTube video, or you can simply paste that into a comment in the assignment. All right. But there's a lot of you that don't have any artifacts in, and we're in week 6. We have another week and you need 7 of them. So I don't know if you're just holding on to them and you're going to post them all at once. Don't do that. You need to post your ePortfolio artifacts. They are due. They are worth up to 4 points of your 20-point grade to get an A. All right. So if you don't do any of the ePortfolio artifacts, you're topping out at 16. You'd have to get 4s on everything, which you're probably not at, to get an A. So do your ePortfolio artifacts. Do your ePortfolio artifacts. Do your ePortfolio artifacts. All right. That's it for this feedback video. I hope you enjoy the music of Module 6, and I look forward to reading your reverse movie scenes soon. All right. Bye-bye.